What if I told you there's a machine, a vast economic engine, assembled over a century with one primary function: to systematically block you from building wealth, all based on the color of your skin? This isn't a dystopian fantasy. It's the documented financial reality for Black America. Imagine a machine not of humming metal and spinning gears, but one constructed from laws, city maps, and banking policies, a system meticulously engineered to act like a giant financial siphon, pulling wealth away from one group and ensuring they can never catch up. But this isn't just a story about a relentless machine. It's a story of defiance. It's about the people who are meticulously studying its inner workings, finding its vulnerabilities, its stress points, and piece by piece, starting to dismantle it. To understand this machine, you have to look at its original architectural blueprint. That blueprint was drawn up in the 1930s, and it's called redlining. Think of it like a rigged board game. The federal government created color-coded maps of American cities, and these maps were the rule book. They decided who got to play the game of home ownership and who was permanently locked out. Neighborhoods where Black families live were almost always outlined in red, labeled hazardous, and deemed too risky for investment. This wasn't just a suggestion. It was official policy from powerful agencies like the Federal Housing Administration. The very government meant to protect all its citizens was creating a system to deny one group access to the single greatest wealth-building tool in American history: owning a home. The statistics are staggering. Between 1934 and 1962, a minuscule 2% of FHA-backed loans went in non-white families. By the 1940s, this blueprint had trapped nearly 90% of Black Americans in these red-line zones. Picture two families, starting with the same dreams. One is given a green light to get a low-interest loan and buy a house in a desirable area. That house is more than a home. It's a financial seed. Over decades, that seed sprouts, and its value grows into a massive tree of equity. They can use its fruit to send their kids to college, start a business, or leave a legacy. Now, picture the other family, living just a few blocks away in a red zone. They are denied that same loan. They are forced to rent, pouring their money into a bucket with a hole in it. Every month, their hard-earned income vanishes, building zero equity and creating no generational wealth. The decision wasn't based on their work ethic, their savings, or their character. It was based on a red line on a map. That single policy was like a railroad switch, diverting the train of economic opportunity for Black communities onto a dead-end track. It wasn't just about housing. It was the master switch that created a cycle of economic disparity. This was the birth of the machine. So, what does the output of this machine look like today, decades after redlining was officially banned? It looks like a financial Grand Canyon, a racial wealth gap so vast and deep it's difficult to comprehend. The modern numbers are a gut punch. According to the Federal Reserve's 2022 data, the median wealth for a white family is $284,310. For a Black family, it's just $44,100. Let that sink in. Over $284,000 versus just over $44,000. It means that for every dollar of wealth a typical white family holds, a typical Black family has only about 15 cents. Even when you compare incomes, the gap is stark. In 2023, the median income for a Black household was around $56,490, while for a non-Hispanic white household, it was $89,050. This isn't an accident or a failure of ambition. This is a calculated, long-term result of a system that has been running for nearly a century. Imagine wealth building is a relay race. For generations, one team was systematically blocked from even grabbing the baton, prevented from owning assets like a home, stocks, or a business. You don't just outlaw those blockades and declare the race fair. You wake up to find one team is miles ahead, with the machine still humming along, working to widen their lead. The racial wealth gap is not a bug in the system. It's the feature. It's the machine working exactly as it was designed. The machine is so much more than its original redlining blueprint. That was just the foundation. Over the years, new gears were bolted on, all interlocking and turning in concert to keep the cycle of inequality in motion. Let's look at the gear of education. In the United States, Public schools are primarily funded through local property taxes. So, when a neighborhood's property values have been intentionally suppressed for decades, what happens? The schools in those neighborhoods are starved of resources. It's like planting a forest where one side gets sunlight and rain, and the other is kept in perpetual shadow. It creates a direct pipeline from a segregated neighborhood to an underfunded classroom, stunning potential before it has a chance to grow. Then there's the grinding gear of employment. Black Americans consistently face higher unemployment rates. Even with the same college degree, a wage gap persists. This isn't random. It's the legacy of occupational segregation, a subtle system that historically funneled black workers into lower-paying jobs with less room for advancement, grinding away at their ability to build savings and climb the economic ladder. And then you have the most brutal gear of all, the criminal justice system. For years, a widely cited statistic warned that 1 in 3 black boys born could expect to be incarcerated, while recent studies from 2023 show that number has thankfully improved to 1 in 5. That risk is still devastatingly high, especially when compared to just 1 in 24 for white boys. Mass incarceration is like removing a vital organ from the body of a community. It doesn't just steal an individual's freedom. It destabilizes entire families, removes earners, and creates a feedback loop of trauma and economic crisis that ripples for generations. When you see how these gears connect, underfunded schools, wage gaps, and mass incarceration all build on a foundation of housing discrimination, you see the machine in its terrifying entirety. It affects every part of life. It even affects how long you live. Life expectancy for black Americans is around 73 years, significantly lower than the more than 77 years for white Americans, a stark reflection of the cumulative stress and lack of resources generated by this system. But here's where the story turns. Because for as long as this machine has been running, people have been finding ways to throw a wrench in its gears. They aren't waiting for permission. They're building their own tools and their own systems, right in the heart of communities the machine was designed to crush. One of the most powerful tools is the rise of Black-led community development financial institutions, or CDFIs. Think of them as a counterflow to the machine's financial siphon. They are banks and credit unions designed to do exactly what corporate banks wouldn't: pump capital into overlooked communities. They are specialists in possibility, providing loans for black entrepreneurs, affordable housing, and credit building. Where a big bank is measured by profit, a CDFI is measured by community uplift. An institution like Hope Credit Union, which is black and women-owned, intentionally places 8 out of every 10 of its branches in majority black communities. The primary challenge is that black-led CDFIs are chronically underfunded, but groups like the African American Alliance of CDFI CEOs are fighting to change that. Another brilliant tool is the Community Land Trust, or CLT. The modern CLT was born from the fire of the civil rights movement in the 1960s, when black farmers in Georgia created new communities, incorporated to secure land for families being evicted for trying to register to vote. Today, that legacy is a powerful weapon against displacement. CLTs are nonprofits that act as a community anchor. They buy land and hold it in a trust forever. This allows them to create permanently affordable housing in community spaces, fighting back against the tide of gentrification that so often washes longtime residents out. Groups like the Africa Down Community Land Trust in Seattle are using this model to give the black community a permanent, unshakable stake in their own neighborhoods. These aren't just programs. They are acts of economic resistance. This is what it looks like when communities start building their own machine, one designed for creation, not extraction. Community-led work is the heart of this movement. But to truly break the machine for good, you have to go to the source and rewire its broken circuitry. That takes bold, intentional policy reform. It has to start with housing, not just enforcing fair housing laws, but actively investing capital into the neighborhoods that were starved for a century. But it can't stop there. This isn't about patching faulty wires. It's about a complete rewiring. We need to break the direct link between property taxes and school funding. A child's education shouldn't be determined by a zip code drawn by a racist map 80 years ago. It's like ensuring every room in a house gets equal power, instead of letting the living room hoard it all while the bedrooms go dark. We need economic policies that boost the entire system's power, like raising the federal minimum wage, an action that would disproportionately lift up black workers and their families. And we absolutely must reform a criminal justice system that acts as a primary engine of economic inequality. That means sentencing reform, investing in alternatives to prison, and rooting out the systemic biases that have fractured black communities for generations. This isn't about handouts. It's about repair. It's about a nation finally admitting that its economic system was deliberately rigged against one group of its people, and that it will take a deliberate, focused national effort to fix it. It's about finally building a country where your race does not determine your prosperity. This is a massive, complex machine, and there's no single button to shut it down. So I want to hear from you. What do you think is the most effective way to start dismantling this system? Is it through community finance, policy change, education, or something else entirely? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if this video gave you a new perspective, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. We have to keep this conversation going. Community-led work is the heart of this movement. But to truly break the machine for good, you have to go to the source and rewire its broken circuitry. That takes bold, intentional policy reform. It has to start with housing, not just enforcing fair housing laws, but actively investing capital into the neighborhoods that were starved for a century. But it can't stop there. This isn't about patching faulty wires. It's about a complete rewiring. We need to break the direct link between property taxes and school funding. A child's education shouldn't be determined by a zip code drawn by a racist map 80 years ago. It's like ensuring every room in a house gets equal power, instead of letting the living room hoard all while the bedrooms go dark. We need economic policies that boost the entire system's power, like raising the federal minimum wage, an action that would disproportionately lift up black workers and their families. Machines thrive in silence. They work best when no one notices their hum, when no one questions their design. Redlining for decades was invisible to those who didn't live inside its red zones. School funding formulas were accepted as normal. Loan denials were brushed off as risk management. Mass incarceration was framed as justice. But once you start naming it, this is redlining, this is structural inequality, this is systemic racism, the machine loses its camouflage. It becomes visible. And when something becomes visible, it can be confronted. The racial wealth gap didn't just happen. It was manufactured. The education divide didn't emerge. It was engineered. The criminal justice disparities weren't coincidences. They were designed outcomes. By naming the machine, we transform what was once accepted as background noise into a glaring alarm demanding action. To truly grasp the urgency of dismantling the system, we must acknowledge the cost of silence. Generational silence has been expensive, not just financially, but spiritually, emotionally, and communally. Financially, the 2022 Federal Reserve data revealed that black families hold about 15 cents for every dollar of white wealth. That's not just a number. It's college tuition unpaid, businesses unstarted, homes unbought, and legacies unbuilt. Emotionally, imagine carrying the knowledge that no matter how hard you work, your labor is running uphill against the gravitational pull of systemic disadvantage. That silent weight has crushed millions of dreams. Communally, when schools are underfunded, when fathers are absent because of incarceration, when opportunities are stripped, it fractures the connective tissue of neighborhoods. Communities that should be thriving together are forced to survive apart. Silence allows the machine to run smoothly. Breaking that silence, through education, through storytelling, through activism, introduces friction, and friction slows gears. The architects of this machine overlooked one thing: the human spirit. They could design policies, draw maps, enforce laws, but they could not predict the resilience, creativity, and determination of the very people they sought to suppress. Look back across history. When banks denied loans, black families created credit unions and mutual aid societies. When land was stripped, black farmers bought land collectively. When schools were underfunded, black teachers, often with fewer resources, still produced generations of leaders. When incarceration tore families apart, communities organized around reentry programs and grassroots support. Every time the machine shifted gears, people found ways to resist. They didn't always dismantle it, but they bent its impact slowed its force, and kept hope alive for the next generation. That's the flaw. No machine, no matter how efficient, can erase the will to fight back. Breaking this system requires more than outrage. It requires architecture. If the machine was built by design, then liberation must also be built by design. And the blueprint has several key pillars. Economic redesign. Expand funding for Black-led community development financial institutions, CDFIs. Invest in Black entrepreneurship and land ownership. Redirect public and private capital into historically excluded communities. Educational equity. Decouple school funding from property taxes. Expand universal pre-K and after-school programs in underserved areas. Celebrate and integrate Black history into national curricula, ensuring that the machine's mechanics are never forgotten. Criminal justice reform. End mandatory minimum sentencing for nonviolent crimes. Restore voting rights for formerly incarcerated citizens. Redirect funds from mass incarceration into community rehabilitation, job training, and mental health services. Housing justice. Repair and reinvest in formerly redlined neighborhoods. Expand affordable housing through community land trusts. Strengthen tenant protections against predatory landlords and gentrification. This isn't charity. This is repair. It is acknowledging harm and intentionally building a countersystem designed not to extract, but to empower. One of the most radical acts in the face of systemic oppression is hope. Hope is not naive optimism. Hope is work. Hope is organizing, voting, investing, educating, building. It is waking up every day knowing the odds are stacked and choosing to push anyway. When communities create land trusts, they are practicing hope. When parents march into underfunded schools demanding resources, they are practicing hope. When young entrepreneurs launch businesses in neighborhoods banks once abandoned, they are practicing hope. Hope is fuel. It is what turns a vision of a different system into labor of dismantling the old one. So, what does life look like when the machine is dismantled? It looks like a child in Detroit walking into a school with the same resources as a child in Palo Alto. It looks like a young Black entrepreneur receiving a fair loan with the same ease as their white counterpart. It looks like families who once rented for generations now owning homes, building equity, and passing it forward. It looks like prisons no longer overflowing with young Black men, but communities overflow with opportunity, mentorship, and growth. It looks like wealth not being a marker of race, but of effort, creativity, and collaboration. This is not a utopia. It's simply equity. And equity is not an impossible dream. It is a design challenge, one we are capable of solving if we commit to it. Here's where it becomes personal. Machines don't stop because someone points at them. They stop because someone pulls a lever, unplugs a cord, jams the gears. That someone has to be us, not just policymakers, not just activists, but ordinary people refusing to let the hum of inequality continue unchallenged. So ask yourself, where can you insert friction into machine? Is it voting for policies that prioritize equity? Is it supporting Black-owned businesses and financial institutions? Is it mentoring the next generation so they enter the race already holding the baton? Is it telling these stories, refusing to let the narrative be buried again? Every action is a gear turner. Every decision either oils a machine or rusts it. The machine was built to break you. But the deeper truth is this. You were built to outlast a machine. Your ancestors endured enslavement, survived Jim Crow, resisted redlining, challenged mass incarceration. Every generation passed down not just trauma, but resilience, not just wounds, but wisdom, not just struggle, but strategy. And now, in this generation, we have more tools, more awareness, and more possibility than ever before to finally dismantle the system at its core. It will not be easy. Machines this big do not fall quietly, but they do fall. History is not a straight line. It is a loop. Systems built on exploitation eventually collapse under the weight of their own injustice. The question is not how the machine will end, but how quickly, and who will push the final lever. That is our responsibility. That is our inheritance. That is our fight. If you stayed with me through this journey, then you know this is more than history. It's more than economics. It's more than politics. This is about dignity. This is about whether freedom in America is truly universal or forever conditional. The system was built to break you, but we are the generation rewriting the blueprint. And piece by piece, gear by gear, voice by voice, we are breaking it. Not tomorrow, not someday. Now, thank you for walking with me through this journey. If this story opened your eyes or stirred something inside you, don't let it stop here. Hit that like button so more people see this truth. Smash that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, because we are just getting started. And you don't want to miss the next chapter. Your voice matters. Your support matters. And together, we're building a community strong enough to break the system they said could never be broken. So subscribe, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and let's keep shining light into the dark. I appreciate you. I see you, and I'll meet you in the next one.